and get started. All right, so you're joining me today for the session, Maximizing Memory Retention with Microlearning. We're going to be talking about what is microlearning, why is it a useful tool, and how am I going to use Quizlet to empower my students with this microlearning idea and philosophy of education. All right, my name is Jess Pilgreen, and this is, I think, my 4th year with the Unconference. I'm so glad to be back. I always love this conference. It's a great learning experience for me, and I love sharing different tricks and tips with all of you as well. So just a little bit of background about myself. I have been teaching. I just finished my 20th year in public education back in May, and I have spent the last 18 years in the same district. I work at a very small rural public high school in southwestern Illinois. I'm maybe 30 miles east of St. Louis, Missouri. I've been teaching secondary English all 20 years. I am a national board certified teacher in ELA for adolescence and young adulthood. And I have my doctorate in education from the University of Missouri in St. Louis. And I never stop growing. I'm always learning, trying to learn new things by attending conferences like this. I feel so fortunate to be part of this and also to just be learning from other people as well. So I'm glad everybody is here. Also, before we get started, because you can search Quizlet by the name of the teacher or the user who created the study set, here is my username. Especially if you teach English, I think you might find some of my study sets useful. So you can copy down my username. It's Jess Pilgreen. Okay. And then the topics that I teach are 9th grade English. I have a honors track as well as a traditional track of students. I teach British literature. I teach multicultural novels, which is a low reading level but high interest level course. I teach creative writing. And even if you don't teach any of those, I also have resources on growth mindset, which is a wonderful way to start your school year off as well. So if any of that sounds like something that you might be interested in looking at, please look for my username on Quizlet. I'm more than happy to share my study sets with you. Oh, I got some more English teachers. I love seeing other English teachers. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So here is our agenda for today. First, we're going to talk about what exactly is microlearning and what are the compelling whys. Why should we as teachers leverage microlearning with our students? Why should we be using microlearning? Then we'll talk about what are some examples of microlearning activities that I can use with my students, because it's one thing to kind of discuss the psychology or the theory of microlearning, but it's another thing to say like, okay, but what does that look like in my classroom? What are some things I can do to empower my students to become the best learners that they can be? Then we will talk about how we can use Quizlet to facilitate microlearning with your students. And then there will be lots of time for question and answer towards the end of the session. All right. Okay, so we cannot talk about microlearning until we talk about learning loss. Teachers, you know this is a real thing. If you personally have seen learning loss among your students, let me know in the chat. I have a feeling that a lot of you have seen this. So what we have here is Ebbinghaus was a German psychologist from 1850 to 1909 who is famous for studying memory, especially the forgetting curve. This is sort of what he's best known for. So we have a chart here that just shows you the truth of the forgetting curve among our students. And I see a lot of you in here talking about the summer slide. Yes, you've seen it. Yeah, every year, but especially after COVID. Yes. So this is something that we see all the time with our students. So we also know from this research that as teachers, we can support this with their own anecdotal data, which a lot of you are doing here. Okay, you cover something at the beginning of the year or the beginning of a unit. You can't do just a one and done. If we try to do that, like you give your students a vocabulary list, for example, and they go through it one time, they are going to forget it so quickly. And according to this chart and this data, we see even within 20 minutes. So they leave your class and they go on to the next class or the next subject. 42% of the information you covered, whoop, gone. It's already gone. Okay. And then within 24 hours, more than half, 67% of the learning has been lost. So we know that one and done is not something that's going to work for our students. And if we want them to really retain that information over long term, then we need to do something about it. Okay. Okay, so another thing with Ebbinghaus is not only did he talk about the forgetting curve, he also talked about spacing out the information over time. So the spacing effect, this was something that he researched and wrote about in 1885. This is the idea that repetitions spaced in time produce stronger memories than repetitions closely together. So we're going to remember that information. We're going to retain it for a much longer period of time when we review the material multiple times if we space it out. This is one way that we can use microlearning. So another way to think about this is what the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve and the spaced repetition is telling us is that students, if you have them study, let's say for 10 minutes every day for a week, they're going to retain that information for longer than if they did one like hardcore 70-minute study session the night before. Now they can cram and remember it possibly for the short term, but it's not going to stay with them long term. So truly to really understand the information, digest it, store it in that long-term memory, we want to engage them with some microlearning to help them retain the information. I love seeing all of the information in the chat too. So as you're listening to this, if you hear things that are really compelling or things that you really see that ring true with you, please feel free to share those in the chat feature. I love a lively chat going on. All right, so what is microlearning? Well, this is a working definition that I really like to use. Microlearning is an instructional unit that provides a short engagement in an activity intentionally designed to elicit a specific outcome from the participant. And what do we mean by that? So by instructional unit, we mean that it's autonomous. It's not part of some long like chain of events activities. Like we're not doing like a an introduction and then like a guided practice and then an independent practice. That's pieces of a longer lesson. Microlearning really should be its own little chunk or bite-sized piece of learning. It should be autonomous and a standalone activity. Okay, it's short engagement, which means it's brief, lasting usually only a couple of minutes. Engagement means that it should be something engaging, something that students want to engage with and want to participate in. Also here, because it's an activity, it should be something that students are doing actively, not passively. We're not asking them to just sit back and be like funnel the information into them, right? And they just sit there and receive it from us. We want them to be actively engaged in some sort of experience. And also, we want there to be a specific outcome. In other words, some sort of a measurable result. So together we see that microlearning involves a standalone activity. It should be brief, it should be engaging, it should be something active, and it should end with some sort of a measurable result. Okay. Also, I want to point out that when we talk about microlearning, we're really talking about those lower order thinking skills of Bloom's taxonomy, like the remembering, maybe the understanding, possibly applying, but those lower order thinking skills. Microlearning is supposed to help you build a strong foundation of understanding so that eventually you can go on to those higher order thinking skills like creating, evaluating, and analyzing. But the concept itself is really more directed to the lower order thinking skills. But again, those lower order thinking skills are a strong foundation that you can build on so that later as you go forward, you can build on the higher order thinking skills. Okay, so when I looked for specific examples, I thought, oh, great. Okay, I know what microlearning is. I know what it should be. I know what the definition of it is. You know, I have a good working definition, even though there's still lots of different definitions floating around there. What does it look like in my classroom? Well, when I looked up different resources, these are some of the most common microlearning experiences that I found. So they talked about things like flashcards, individualized learning paths, multiple question quizzes, online games, short educational videos, a brief podcast, a how-to or instructional video, leading students through a simulation, or providing them with an infographic. And when I saw all of these different examples of microlearning, what did I notice? Well, let me tell you what I noticed. Quizlet it provides most of these different type of activities. Flashcards, yes, Quizlet has flashcards. Individualized learning paths, absolutely. Multiple question quizzes, you know Quizlet has that. Online games, yes. And then other items here, like a short educational video or a podcast or a how-to video, things like that. Although they aren't already on Quizlet, they're very easy to pair with the other bolded items here. So Quizlet offers lots of these different micro-learning activities, these bite-sized instructional activities for students to do. And I'm going to show you how to use some of those in your classroom. And by the way, micro-learning isn't something that's a new concept. This is a concept that's been around a long time, but it's experiencing this resurgence because the educational landscape itself is just looking very different. We've got, distance learning, hybrid learning, we've got flipped education. So we see, the need for more micro learning, and also with the boom of educational technology, we have more pathways for micro learning as well. All right, I see I have some questions. I will be coming back to those towards the end of the presentation. So keep typing them in and I'll be happy to address those later in the presentation. Okay, so flashcards, yes, this is probably the thing that got you hooked on Quizlet to begin with, is their wonderful, amazing flashcards. So I have just a animated video here showing you how wonderful the flashcards are. I personally love to personalize them and make them more interactive by adding photos, diagrams, timelines, that rich text formatting. And if you want more information about how to make your flashcards the best they can be, if you didn't see Maureen's session, the 201, Quizlet 201 earlier today, you're going to want to go back and watch that, because she had a whole session where she really talked about using all of these to give your study sets that extra wow factor that's going to really get your students engaged. But there's so many awesome things that you can add to your study sets to make the students more engaged. Okay. Also, individualized learning paths. And earlier, if you were in the first, I think it was the first session today, Megan talked about this too. So now students can create their own learning paths. When I go into a study set and I click on Learn, it prompts me with these specific questions. It asks, what is your goal? Do you want to study quickly so that you build short-term memory? Do you want to memorize it all so that you can build your long-term memory? Or do you want to learn and apply to build your long-term memory? So you can choose one of those. And then it also asks you, well, how well do you know the information already? Is this a completely new study set? It's got things you're not familiar with yet. Do you know some of it, like you've started working on it, but you're not quite an expert? Or do you feel like you need most of it and you just need a quick refresher? So this is great that now we have this ability to customize the learning paths so students have their learning really tailored to their needs. Okay. We also have multiple question quizzes. If you didn't hear already, print is back. I love printing these quizzes. One thing I'll do sometimes is I go through and I'll print the quiz and then I'll give it as like a pre-assessment to kind of, in addition to using it as micro-learning, I'll do it as sort of a quick, what's your background knowledge? Because I have a lot of students who already know a lot about like Greek mythology, especially with some of like the Rick Riordan books and things like that. So it's nice to see where they're already at and then make sure that by the end of the unit, they've learned, even if they already have a strong background knowledge. And I also love that you have the option here to change the different types of questions. You can do written questions, you can do multiple choice, you can do matching, you can do true, false, or you can do a combination of each. If you pick all four, or if you pick just two, Quizlet automatically generates the quiz so that it's broken up into an even number of question formats. So if I picked multiple choice and matching, half my questions would be multiple choice, half would be matching. If I picked all four, a quarter would be written, a quarter multiple choice, a quarter matching, and a quarter true, false. And another thing that I love is when every time I click on that, like create the test, it generates a completely different version. So even if I wanted to do, well, let's say matching, but I want to create like 2 different versions because my kids sit in pairs, or 4 different versions because my kids sit in pods, I can just click create test, print it, create test, print it, create test, and it's going to generate a completely different test each time. So that's another thing that I really love. But doing those practice quizzes is a great micro-learning activity because it can be done quickly and then students can take a look at it, look at how they did, and then decide what their next steps are going to be. Okay. We also have online games. I am so excited to hear that Match is going to get a little bit of a facelift and be even more engaging. It's already one of my students' favorite activities, but the idea that it's going to be updated is awesome. I'm really looking forward to see the new interface and how it works. So this is an animated video showing Match if you haven't played it before. What it does is students quickly, in a matter of minutes, it starts the game, and then they quickly drag the term and the definition, and when they match them up correctly, you'll see here, they disappear. And so it's a process of elimination. Again, micro-learning needs to be quick. Look at that timer. We're going to be done in about 16 seconds. Okay. And this is really fun because students can play independently. There is a leaderboard if you want to use the leaderboard. I just like to encourage students to compete against themselves and beat their previous time, though. We also have the classic live game where students can play either independently or they can play in small groups, usually of about 3 or 4. And then we also have Checkpoint 2, which is great for formative assessment for the teacher as well. So all 3 of those are just different things that you can do as a micro-learning activity for your students. Okay. Now, what about some other things like educational videos? Well, it's great to hear that soon Quizlet is going to be partnering with things like I heard Crash Course and some of those other different video productions available out there. But what I've done here is if maybe the one, like the company that you like I love TED Ed. So if they don't have anything with that for Quizlet yet, it's really easy to pair a video or a video that you yourself have made. I like to make educational videos for my students as well. So what you can do is you can pair the 2 with something like a simple Google site. So what you see here, and I typed in the link, if you go to that tinyurl.com/unconferencehero, what you can do is you will see a very simple Google site that I made in maybe 5 minutes. And what I did was I used the embed code from the video and I pasted it in. And then I used the embed code from Quizlet because Quizlet also has embed code. And then I embedded in a match game. So what I would do here is I would have students first watch the video. And again, it's like a 5-minute video. And then I would have them do a quick match game. And even those 2 activities together, it's still very, very short and would count as micro-learning. Yeah. Yeah. So there is embed code. So those of you who know how to use it, and this works, I know Canvas uses embed code too. And I know that I've used Weebly before and some other drag and drop format sort of website builders. So if you want to use any of those, most of those use embed code as well. Okay. Another option is you could take something like an infographic. Like here, I found an infographic about the 12 Jungian archetypes that I wanted my students to learn. So what I did was I took I used a Google form, and then I put the infographic there. I added it as an image, and then I also went in and I put in a link, just a quick link for Quizlet.com, so that students know that once they're finished examining the infographic and they feel confident in their ability to understand the information, it prompts them then to click on the hyperlink and then be sent to Quizlet to do whatever kind of activity they would want to do. So I could instruct them that they need to go and do a practice quiz. I could tell them that they need to go in and do a match game. It's really kind of up to them. Or if you want, you could have them go in and choose what type of review game they want to do. I'm also really excited about the idea that memory score is coming soon. I know Megan talked about this a little bit earlier today. So this is when a student studies 10 terms in flashcards, learn, test, or match. It triggers some sort of notification, the algorithm does, and it schedules a review for the students. So this is kind of what it looks like here in the animation. It'll tell you when your review is complete. And it tells you your memory score. So here it's a 68%. And then in order to keep that memory score up or to advance the memory score, they need to come back over time, spaced time, right, to help with that learning loss. And then that's going to help them remember the information, because we're doing spaced out repetition to boost memory. Okay. And then they get those email notifications or push notifications that motivate them to come back to keep their memory fresh and to keep that memory score up. If anybody else is excited about memory score, let me know in the chat. I know that's one thing I'm really looking forward to. Oh, someone says they need to do it for themselves. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I could use some memory score. Okay. All right. So when to use micro learning? Well, I mean, any time is a good time to use it, but some specific times that really stick out to me include bell ringers, having students practice something like the first 5 to 10 minutes of class. As a bell ringer activity, they could do that every day, maybe every Monday. But if you space it out and you give them multiple repetitions, it's going to help them really take that information and store it in their long-term memory. Another nice thing is because Quizlet is so user-friendly and so accessible, like you can use it on your desktop, your laptop, your iPad, your smartphone. There's so many ways to use it that students, or, again, printing and sending those papers home with students, because some of them, they might not have really strong internet access, or they might just prefer the hands-on with the paper. So that's another great thing too, is that you can, so that's another great thing is that you can, you guys are making me laugh, sorry. Someone said we need a Quizlet now to see how much we remember from the first 3 minutes of this session to check for memory loss. I love that. Okay, but yes, so home access as well. So you can give them access by printing things out for them, or they can just access it with their appropriate technology. This is also something that they can do during study hall. A lot of my students have a study hall and they're like, well, I don't have homework, so I don't really have anything to do in the study hall. Well, maybe you don't have homework, but now's a great opportunity for some micro learning. So go in there and review some old sets. See if you still remember it. Try to store that in your long-term memory. Also advisory, our students have an advisory. It's like 20-25 minutes at the end of the day. And again, if they've already finished their homework and they need an activity, this is a great activity as well. It's also wonderful for students who tend to finish work early. They can always go on and they always have something to do, or as a sponge activity too, again, to soak up some of that unused time so that students aren't sitting there turning to things like YouTube videos or social media. All right, and then again, it's question and answer time, so I'm excited to answer some of your questions. But if you want to write down my username here, it's Jess Pilgreen, and if you search on Quizlet, you will be able to find my study sets. I think these will be especially useful for anyone who teaches English language arts. I'd say probably 6 through 12. I have some that are more basic study sets, things like plot pyramid and basic literary terms, growth mindsets, but then I have some more advanced terms too, like characters from Arthurian legend. So if you think that you might be able to use some of my study sets, please find them and then copy all my study sets and then personalize them to make them yours so that they fit your needs. All right, let me pop into the Q&A and see what I have. All right. Yeah, okay, so would you agree that essentially microlearning is similar to chunking, breaking a unit? Yes. Okay, so the only thing that I would say, yes, it is similar to chunking, but sometimes I think of chunking as taking like a huge item and then like breaking it into smaller parts, but I can't do the whole thing from start to finish in a short session. Like I think of chunking for ELA purposes, like I'm reading a long story or I'm reading a long nonfiction article and we're going to break down paragraph 1 and we're going to analyze it over 10 minutes. And then we're going to break down. And so each of those like paragraphs would be kind of enough time to fill a micro learning, but it's really in theory more of like little pieces of the whole, whereas micro learning should be more like self-contained, I guess, if that makes sense, but very similar sort of ideas here. Oh, someone couldn't hear me very well. I hope most of you were able to hear me okay. Ooh. Yeah, okay, so I'm surprised by the suggested length of the microlearning activities, a few minutes. Yeah, so I mean 2 minutes, sure. It just depends on how much, I would say probably like 5 minutes is good, maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes is kind of pushing it because of the amount of information you might be covering possibly in 10 minutes might not be enough. And it might be too much and overwhelm students so that it's harder for them to move it into long-term memory. Yeah. Any other questions that anybody has? Okay, not necessarily. I see. So anything longer than TikTok is out of the question. Well, yes, our students do have short attention spans. So short is good. But it could definitely be a little bit longer than TikTok. A little bit longer is fine. Oh yeah, thank you to everybody who attended. I appreciate it. I'm still here if anybody has questions. And also, if you have questions later on, please feel free to email me. My email address is here on the screen, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, whether it's about microlearning, whether it's about like using Quizlet and embedding it in your instructional strategies, like with the Google Sites or the Google Form. If you have questions about my study sets, anything like that, I am here to help. That's one thing that I love to do, is help other teachers. So please feel free. I'm looking forward to hearing from some of you. Okay. Oh, thank you, everybody. You have a wonderful day. I'm still going to stay for anybody who has questions. We've got like 3 more minutes. If you're scooting on to the next session, thank you for stopping by. I really appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. I hope everybody has a great day. We have so many exciting sessions, and remember that they're going to be recorded, so you'll still have access to them. I think till August 8th or 9th was the day that we'll have access to. I've already attended some really wonderful sessions earlier today. Oh, you've heard me speak before. Yeah, I love these sessions. Thank you so much, Catherine. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad that they're good examples, everybody. Hi, Vicky in Chicago. Hi from downstate. I think I don't know if the slides will be available, but I know that Quizlet always records these sessions and then posts them on YouTube later as well. Or if you want the slides, send me an email and I'll share the slides with you. Yeah, make sure you catch some other sessions. I'll be doing a session just for ELA folks tomorrow if you want to stop by for my session. All right, if anybody else has questions, please let me know. Yeah, it's all right if you missed some of the earlier sessions, you'll still have access to them. Yeah, Victoria, I believe so. I believe that they're going to give you a certificate of participation, and you'll still have access to recordings, the Zoom recordings of the sessions. And again, if anybody wants my slides specifically on microlearning or my session from tomorrow on ELA, you can email me and I'm happy to share